Have with me the Honourable David Lametti, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, the Honourable Marc Miller, Minister of Crown-Indigenous Relations, Natan Obed, President of Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami, Cassidy Caron, President of the Métis National Council, National Chief RoseAnne Archibald, Assembly of First Nations, Regional Chief Terry Teegee, British Columbia Assembly of First Nations, Elder Jenny Tenasco from Kitigan Zibi, Mayali Bushami, Kulik Lighter, as well as Métis Elder Albert Leclerc. We also have Minister Patty Haidu with us and several parliamentary secretaries, senators, and other leaders. Thank you for being here. We'll have the opportunity to hear opening remarks from each of the speakers I've introduced and then go into a Q&A with the media. Nous aurons l'occasion d'entendre des remarques de chacun de nos invités, puis nous passerons aux questions et réponses avec le média. To open today's event, I'd like to turn to Elder Jenny Tenasco for opening words. J'invite Aîné Tenasco à prononcer des mots d'ouverture.
Kwe kakina. Jenny Buckshot Nidishnikas, Kitigan Zibi ni Donjba. Good afternoon. My name is Jenny Buckshot Tenasco. I am a member of the Kitigan Zibi and Anishinaabe. Ottawa is located in the heart of my nation's territory. Welcome to Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. It is an honor to be a part of this event today. It is long overdue that the Government of Canada honors and recognizes the inherent rights of Indigenous people. The time for action is now. And I will begin my prayer. Longom, ka migwetria, pijamanado, kakanakego ka vigendan. Migwetonje aki. Migwetonje netauging, mishashkin, wayagajik, kaemetiko kakanamashki, kaemijam. Migwetonje awensi sap, kapamotejik, kaneo kadejik, kapamisuajik, kamajamewajik. Migwetonje pieces, the big pieces, kayanangwashak. Migwetonje nesewin, kamijan kijimenope madaziam. Migwetonje kokomisag, shomisag, kakanani dodemag. Widoka wishin kijinabwakayon. Widoka wayakazajik, shawenim nibojik. Kidamakazajik, wawisanajik. Migwetonje kakana, unjen nongom. Miye, kichimigwech. Migwech.
Thank you so much. Merci, Miigwech, Elder Tenasco, for starting us off in a very positive way. Today's event is indeed historic. The release of the first United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Action Plan for 2023 to 2028. Noting the importance of this event, Mayali Bushami has lit the kulik. I would offer Elder Bushami the opportunity to provide a few words.
Nakomi luna sita baniti tau kun naktu naukata tunga suti taukata lo nuna kakasimayo nunangani. Thank you. The khudlik is a symbol of a thriving people, Inuit, and it has been a vital source for our culture, providing warmth, heat, light during the dark days, and food. So it also symbolizes prosperity. So, tabba nakotmi.
Thank you so much, Mayali. J'invite maintenant le ministre de la Justice et procureur général du Canada, David Lametti, à dire quelques mots. Oh. We're in an awkward spot here because we all have a vote in the next few minutes, but une fois que M. Lametti a fini son vote, il va venir au podium pour expliquer ce plan d'action. Once Minister Lametti has finished his vote, he will come to the podium to introduce the first action plan, and I will go vote. We need some light. It works there. Thank you.
That's done.
Minister Lametti.
Thank you, Dan. Kwe, unaskut, tansi, hello, bonjour. I'm so pleased to be with you here today as we gather on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We honor and recognize all those who have lived on and cared for these lands since time immemorial and continue to do so today. And happy National Indigenous Peoples Day. C'est avec humilité que je reconnais, en cette journée nationale des peuples autochtones, les contributions significatives et importantes que les Premières Nations, les Inuits et les Métis ont apportées et continuent d'apporter à notre identité collective. Miigwech Elder Jenny Tenasco for opening our event in a good way. Elder Jenny, there we are. For opening our event in a good way, and to Miali Bushemi Nakramik for the lighting of the kulik. I also want to thank in advance Elder Albert Leclerc for offering to help us later to bring a close to the proceedings. I'm grateful to all three of you for grounding this event with your knowledge, your words, and your presence here today. I also want to extend my deep gratitude to ITK President Natan Obed, MNC President Cassidy Caron, National Chief RoseAnne Archibald, and Regional Chief of the AFN, Terry Teegee, for walking with us on this journey and for your partnership and collaboration that has enabled us to arrive at this moment, the release of the Action Plan 2023 to 2028. I want to acknowledge the presence and leadership role of many persons with us here today. Chilcotin Tribal Chairman Chief Joe Alphonse. I think Chief Joe's somewhere. I'm looking for his hat. There we are. Makivik President. Makivik President Peter Tammy will not be with us today. I want to extend the same appreciation to modern treaty partners. I know that President Eva Clayton from the Nisga'a Lisms Nation wanted to be with us today, but couldn't, and to our numbered historic treaty partners. I also want to salute organizations such as Paktutit, Les Femmes Michif, and NWAC for the work that they have done. And finally, on a personal note, I want to recognize the inspiration. They're not here with us today, but two people who have inspired me throughout this process, Chief Wilton Littlechild and Sakich Henderson, my old academic colleague in the largest sense. Two people who have put a lot of work into the UN Declaration over the years and who have been guiding lights to me throughout the process. I want to acknowledge my cabinet colleagues who are here today, Marc Miller, Patty Haidu, and Dan Vandal, as well as our parliamentary colleagues here from the Senate. I see Vance Badaway. Vance is a Métis person. We were both born on the traditional territory of the Chippewa in Niagara. In Port Colborne, Ontario, and Jaime Batiste, who was here, who is from the Mi'kmaq Nation and is a great member of Parliament and colleague. I also want to underline the presence, I think for the first time at a formal event, of the newly minted President of the Law Commission of Canada, Shauna Van Prague. I don't know where Shauna is, but I know she's here. There we are. Good luck with your mandate as we move forward. The presence and I apologize if I've missed anyone. I will make it up. The presence and participation of such a range of Indigenous partners emphasizes the importance of our words and actions today. Aujourd'hui, à l'occasion de la Journée nationale des peuples autochtones, Nous nous réunissons pour marquer une étape importante vers un avenir meilleur pour les Premières Nations, les Inuits et les Métis au Canada. En regardant la salle, je vois des personnes qui ont consacré leur vie à la création et à l'adoption de la Déclaration des Nations Unies sur les droits des peuples autochtones. Nous sommes profondément endettés envers vous. Votre persévérance, votre créativité et votre engagement au cours de près de 3 décennies nous a permis d'arriver à ce jour. When the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act became law 2 years ago, we knew that our next challenge was to work together to develop the action plan called for in that act. Thanks to your work, we are here. The timeline was ambitious. That ambition was yours. Indigenous leadership pressed us to work together to deliver an action plan in 2 years, and C-15 at the time was amended to do that. And we made it. And we made it. J'ai dit à nombreuses reprises que le projet de la réconciliation a besoin de véhicules, un processus par lequel les conséquences du colonialisme peuvent être réparées et corrigées. C'est parce que les réflexes qui ont historiquement défini la relation couronne-autochtone datant de plusieurs siècles. Il faudra du temps et beaucoup de travail acharné pour les redévelopper. C'est un travail d'une génération. Ce travail se poursuivra pendant des années après que j'aurai quitté le rôle que j'ai le privilège d'occuper présentement. But this represents a historic moment. This is a transformational document that holds potential and opportunity beyond the words written within its pages. The action plan reflects the diverse voices, perspectives, and priorities of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. It also contains a commitment from the government to make sure that the plan is exactly what it sets out to be, a plan of action. It represents a critical step towards recognizing, promoting, protecting, and upholding the human rights of Indigenous peoples in Canada. As the action plan itself makes clear, it's not a static document, and it's not a perfect document. Rather, it's a living, evergreen roadmap that will continue to evolve in consultation and cooperation and co-development with Indigenous peoples. It will help us set a better, healthier, more equitable course that benefits all Indigenous peoples from coast to coast to coast. So what's in the action plan? It's the product of a collaborative process, one that involved broad and inclusive, as well as distinctions-based engagements with Indigenous peoples and communities across the country. It will guide the steps the Government of Canada will take in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis to implement the principles and rights set out in the UN Declaration and to advance reconciliation in a tangible way. It includes 181 distinct measures aimed at upholding the human rights of Indigenous peoples. These address injustices, prejudice, violence, systemic racism and discrimination, and for monitoring implementation of the plan over time. Le plan d'action touche 28 départements et agences fédéraux. Sa portée est sans précédent. Il traite de l'autodétermination, de l'autonomie, de la participation des peuples autochtones à la prise de décision et de la revitalisation des langues et des cultures. Comprend des mesures nécessaires pour assurer la cohérence des lois fédérales avec la Déclaration des Nations Unies, ainsi que d'autres priorités identifiées au cours du processus de consultation et de coopération. Il prévoit des moyens pour garantir l'imputabilité du Canada pour sa mise en œuvre, y compris des mesures de surveillance, des voies de recours et des mesures de réparation. As I mentioned earlier, there is a mechanism for review and amendment of the plan itself. It's evergreen. It recognizes the inherent rights of Indigenous peoples and acknowledges the duty to respect treaties and agreements. The evolution and renewal of the action plan will be guided by the work of the Action Plan Advisory Committee that will include First Nations, Inuit, and Métis experts. Il devrait donc être clair qu'aujourd'hui, nous franchissons une nouvelle étape sur notre parcours commun. Le Canada s'est engagé à mettre pleinement en œuvre le plan d'action en consultation et en coopération avec les Premières Nations, les Inuits et les Métis. Ceci représente le processus qui mènera au changement transformateur auquel nous aspirons. I want to close on a personal note. There are two more people I want to acknowledge. Both have played a significant role in getting us here today, and both have played a significant role in deepening my understanding and my conviction that the reconciliation path that we are taking is the right one. Jesse McCormick is a member of the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation. He was the Director of Rights Implementation in my ministerial office through the passage of C-15 in 2021. Tanya Monahan holds that position now. She's a member of the Cree Nation of Omenji in Ayu-Ishji, Quebec. Both Jesse and Tanya are outstanding lawyers. Both are deeply immersed in their communities. Each has a profound understanding of the work needed to advance reconciliation. Each is very bright, and each is an exceptional hard worker. Try not to get emotional. Jesse and Tanya have been at my side through hundreds of meetings, many of them with people here in this room. And more than that, they have mentored me as we've navigated our way toward today. So I want to express my gratitude to them. Niawan, Jesse, Chinskumatin, Tanya. I see our work together as a metaphor for reconciliation, a small example of the Declaration in action. Undoing 150 years of colonialism doesn't happen in the life of a single government. As I've said before, we have to identify and strip away layer after layer. But the last 2 years have convinced me that we need a way and a process for this to happen. I believe the action plan is a roadmap, a first roadmap that we're looking for. And through it, together, we can move forward in the spirit of lasting reconciliation and healing. We can finally begin to walk the path that we should have begun 150 or 200 years ago. So Megwich, Nakarmik, merci, thank you, bonjour. I'd like to invite ITK President Natan Obed to say a few words.
Nakamik, thank you for those words, Minister, and this is a very important day. First, I want to just stop and celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day here in Canada. I hope that everyone has had a great day here so far, and for those Indigenous peoples in the room, I hope that you've held your head high and been able to celebrate in the way that means the most to you. I know for me, myself, such a wonderful event at the Governor General's residence where so many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis leaders in this country were celebrated today. And I just stop and think about just the amazing treasure that our people are to this country, and also the service that First Nations, Inuit, and Métis give to Canada. This is something that binds us together, and when I see our Inuk Governor General giving awards to such beautiful, well-deserving Inuit First Nations and Métis, it certainly makes my heart proud, not only as an Inuk, but also as a Canadian. I'd like to recognize the elders here in the room, especially Elder Jenny Tenasco and Elder Albert Leclerc, who will be providing words at the beginning and end. Also, Miali, thank you so much for being here and lighting the kulik. Our median age is 23 in the Inuit population, and so sometimes we don't just include elders in the way that we provide ceremony, and it also is a proof that our culture and our traditions are strong, our language is strong, and that it goes from our youth all the way to our elders. So just wanted to recognize the strength that you have Miali in your culture and language, and thank you for being here. I would also like to thank Martha Flaherty, who is here on behalf of Pauk Dutit as the board member. I really appreciate all the work that you do. My fellow Indigenous leaders, President Caron, National Chief Archibald, Regional Chief Teegee, and all other elected Indigenous leaders here in the room. I want to recognize you all and know that we play a particular role in the governance of our communities, of our collectives, and we also interact with the Government of Canada in a very specific way. I think it's important for Canadians to understand that when the Government of Canada or provinces and territories work with Indigenous peoples, it isn't just a hodgepodge of different organizations that happen to be there in the moment. We have governed ourselves. We have set up structures of democratically elected officials who then work in a rights-holding way with the Government of Canada and with provinces and territories. I also would like to recognize the federal ministers that are here, Minister Lametti, Minister Miller, Minister Vandal, Minister Haidu, and then all other elected leaders from the House of Commons. I also, if there are any senators here, I'd also like to welcome them. Today I'm incredibly optimistic. This is a very important day in regards to the release of the action plan for the UN Declaration Act. I was fortunate enough to be in New York when the Government of Canada reversed its position to unequivocally support the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And that happened in 2016. That was not that long ago. For almost a decade, the Government of Canada rejected the UN Declaration. And it's important to know that this government made that shift and then has worked with us since that day to figure out the best way to implement our existing human rights in this country. It is a long road, but I want to thank all of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis leaders from the 1970s and the 1980s to today who have worked at the international levels to make this day possible here in Canada. I'd also like to thank progressive governments and individual politicians who have stood up for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis rights in this country. From the Inuit side, I would like to thank our Inuit treaty organizations, the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation, Nunavut Tungavik, Makivik, and the Nunatsiavut government for their diligent work, not only on fighting for our Inuit rights, but also participating in the development of the action plan that is being released here today. There is a specific Inuit priorities section within this action plan, and many of the Inuit-specific priorities link back to our existing bilateral mechanism with the Government of Canada. There is a very specific way that we can work together as Inuit to introduce changes to legislation, new programs and policies that would systematically implement our rights in this country, and that can only happen through working with rights-holding institutions. Also in the development of the plan, we work very closely with the Métis National Council, and so President Caron and your team, especially on the Indigenous Human Rights Tribunal, I'd like to thank you for the work that we've done together on that. We've prioritized securing legislative commitments in relation to major legislative gaps between the rights affirmed by the UN Declaration and Canadian law, including in relation to cross-border mobility and immigration, which is Article 36, repatriation of Indigenous human remains and belongings, which is Article 12, and ending and preventing discrimination against Indigenous peoples, which is Article 2. Canada, to my knowledge, is the first and only country to pass national legislation that seeks to implement the UN Declaration. This is commendable and a powerful example of reconciliation in action, and an important opportunity not only for Inuit, but for all Canadians to develop a more just society premised on respect and support for human rights. Although being first means that we do not have the benefit of a roadmap to follow, it also means that it is critical that we get this work right. The UN Declaration Act and the action plan released today will become a standard and blueprint that other nation states with Indigenous populations may follow. The work we are doing together therefore has implications for all Indigenous peoples. The action plan is an important step in the implementation of the UN Declaration insofar as some actions can serve to advance the specific legislative and policy measures required to align federal legislation and policy with the rights affirmed by the UN Declaration. Implementation of this action plan will require active leadership and engagement by Indigenous rights holders and all federal ministers, as well as the development of a more systematic approach to aligning Canada's laws with the UN Declaration in consultation and cooperation with Inuit and other Indigenous peoples and other federal ministers. The rights affirmed by the UN Declaration can only be implemented if they are interpreted as legal rights and implemented and enforced accordingly. Our rights are not second-class rights and deserve the same protection as the rights of other Canadians. I would like to end my remarks by underscoring that the success of the UN Declaration Act in implementing our human rights is contingent in large part on whether the federal government is willing to work with Inuit and other Indigenous peoples to establish an Indigenous Human Rights Commission and Tribunal that will serve to monitor and enforce implementation of our human rights. We have seen that in the absence of effective monitoring and enforcement, international human rights treaties ratified by Canada tend to be ignored or left behind by governments and have little or no positive impact in our communities. In the absence of remedies or enforcement, our people experience systemic discrimination and human rights violations in areas such as access to health services, drinking water and sanitation, and food security. We have to do better. ITK looks forward to beginning the important work of implementing the action plan, and we are seized with the enormous implications of this work, not only for our people, but for all Indigenous peoples globally. Nakomik.
Thank you so much, President Obed. I now hand it over to Cassidy Caron, President of the Métis National Council.
Thank you, Minister. Tansei Kiwao, good afternoon, everyone. As Minister introduced me, my name is Cassidy Caron. I'm President of the Métis National Council. My family comes from the historic Métis communities of Batoche and St. Louis, Saskatchewan, where the South Saskatchewan River connects our people, and I'm so proud to be here today as the President of the Métis National Council. I want to first start by thanking Elder Tenasco for welcoming us and honoring us, starting us off in a really good way today. I have a lot of people also to thank today and to celebrate on National Indigenous Peoples Day. First and foremost, I want to thank my leadership, the leadership of the Métis Nation, my board members from the Métis National Council. I have President Fro, President Smith, Vice President Walter Minot, President Patra. Do I have any other presidents in the room? I think I'm good here. I think I'm covered. But thank you so much for being here with us today on this really, really important day. Today and this week, we also celebrate with the Métis Nation, commemorate 207 years ago, which was the first time our Métis Nation flag flew at the Battle of Seven Oaks. And I can't imagine the people who fought in that battle could have imagined how far we would have come and where we are today. Standing and sharing this stage with federal cabinet ministers, working on this really critical document that will move us forward. So I wanted to acknowledge that time in our history. I also want to celebrate, and as President Obed mentioned, we were with the Governor General this morning celebrating excellence of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. A number of Métis people were invested into the Order of Canada today, including one particular hero of the Métis Nation, Elder John Morrisseau. John Morrisseau received his medal today, and John Morrisseau was a previous president of the Manitoba Métis Federation. He is the one who filed the claim, the landmark Manitoba Métis Federation land claim, and has contributed so much to the Métis Nation, and he deserves that recognition. And I lift him up and I honor him, and I'm so grateful for his support and his mentorship and his guidance, and was so wonderful to see him being celebrated this morning. I also want to celebrate that just moments ago in the House of Commons, a piece of federal legislation was tabled and with unanimous support to move through first and second reading, referred to committee, was a piece of legislation that is so near and dear to our hearts, the self-government implementation legislation for our Métis governments of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. Some hard fights that had to go into that, some very difficult conversations that had to have been had, a lot of relationship building along the way, and we look forward to continuing to build those relationships, have those conversations, and work to implement our right to self-determination and our right to self-government. I want to thank also the individuals within all of our collective institutions, our governments, our Métis governments, and the Government of Canada that put in countless hours of work to prepare this action plan. Your work has brought us to this gathering and has contributed to a significant step towards the recognition of Métis, First Nations, and Inuit rights. And of course, there are those who stood before us, who did so much work to get us here today. And I thank all of those people who have contributed to this action plan, who contributed to the development of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. People like Wilton Littlechild, who talks about how long of a fight it was to develop that declaration and how much patience it took to get to where we are today. So I honor all of those who came before us. And I also want to honor my colleagues from ITK and AFN, and my colleagues, the ministers from the Government of Canada, particularly the work that our staff are doing together on the joint measures, as President Obed stated. With the announcement of the action plan, I am optimistic for the potential that it has to transform Canadian society. The action plan, as Minister Lametti stated, is a living document, and it represents significant progress towards fulfilling Canada's obligation to co-develop these measures. It also illustrates considerable steps that have been taken toward the exercise of Métis self-determination and self-government. Continuing this trajectory and fostering a positive and cooperative relationship with Canada, we will continue to participate as equal partners and uphold our nation-to-nation, government-to-government relationship. Through working on a basis that respects our Métis governments as they aim to legislate, regulate, and act in ways that positively impact our citizens, our relationship with Canada as we implement UNDRIP can only grow. As we work to achieve equality, equity, and prosperity for each citizen of the Métis Nation, we are taking the time to reflect upon the measures included within the action plan. Both the work of the Métis National Council and each of our Métis governments to advance our priorities is not complete with the announcement of this action plan, and we will continue to ensure each measure is implemented in a manner that will benefit the Métis Nation and respect our inherent rights. As an evolving document and through Canada's obligation to consult and cooperate with Indigenous peoples, the action plan will continue to develop over time. We will continue to participate, advocate for the Métis Nation, and ensure that the spirit of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is upheld throughout all areas of our work. As an equal partner that intends to continue to participate in this process in a nation-to-nation, government-to-government manner, we are calling on Canada to continue to do the same. I hope that Canada will continue to act and ensure that each of its departments acts with statutory authority to uphold the measures contained within the United Nations Declaration Act and the Action Plan. As it's been presented today, the Action Plan is truly a powerful tool in advancing First Nations, Inuit, and Métis rights, and the potential to cause significant change for the Métis Nation. It has the potential to inspire not only action by the Government of Canada, but by all Canadians and Métis people across the homeland. So again, I want to commend the work that's gone into the action plan. I want to thank everyone for joining us here today, and I want to thank Elder Albert Leclerc in advance for your closing prayer. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you, everyone.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, President Caron. And I will now hand it over to National Chief RoseAnne Archibald and Regional Chief Terry Teegee of the Assembly of First Nations.
Thank you very much, Dan. I'm actually here mostly to introduce our portfolio holder, Regional Chief Terry Teegee. And but what RoseAnne Archibald, I always start by acknowledging the Creator, the world around us, and our place within it. And I want to acknowledge that we are gathered here on the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation on this National Indigenous Peoples Day. I also want to give recognition to the fact that the Algonquin Nation has not yet achieved restoration of or restitution for their Algonquin lands, territories, resources, as the Articles of the United Declaration requires. Today, as Bill C-15 required, the Government of Canada tabled its UN Declaration Action Plan with Parliament. And I do want to commend the government for this roadmap for implementing the UN Declaration. I hold up the hundreds of First Nations chiefs, technicians, knowledge keepers, youth, and community members who have advocated for their vision of what it means to implement this declaration. I want to just back up a bit and just acknowledge the two matriarchs for the opening prayer and the lighting of the iluk. I hope I'm saying that right. These kinds of sacred moments are essential as we walk this road of reconciliation together. I want you to know that not 100% of First Nations are in agreement with the UNDA. Some are even in disagreement with the UNDRIP itself because it doesn't honor the sovereignty of First Nations, that sovereignty that was required to enter into treaties that settle this country. However, the majority of First Nations have supported this process, and Regional Chief Terry Teegee will speak to that. We are on a long road together, what I call the healing path forward. And before we see the meaningful change to strengthen those historic treaty relationships between First Nations and the Crown, we have to walk these roads together with deep respect for one another. And I believe that we have that commitment with this government. So the Bill C-15 National Action Plan has serious implications for inherent and treaty rights, as well as our First Nations Crown nation-to-nation relationship. And there are, as I mentioned, different positions being held by different nations across Turtle Island, which is now known as Canada. And this really reflects the diversity among First Nations within different regions of the Assembly of First Nations, a diversity that I'm proud to represent as National Chief. And as mentioned, the action plan is a living document that will require revisions over time. And First Nations political and grassroots leadership will hold the government to account to ensure that the 181 measures laid out in the action plan are acted upon in a timely manner. And I see some of the chiefs in this room, such as Chief Joe Alphonse is here to witness this. And I see other leaders from the many Métis nations, National Council, presidents, and so on. I see our Inuit brothers and sisters. And so we'll all work together to make sure that the government is accountable with this, in that respect. But I do want to just say miigwech to everyone for your hard work, because that's what this document is the result of. And I do want to say miigwech to Minister Lametti for your continued dedication to this historic bill and the work that you have done. And I do want to just say to everyone, have a happy National Indigenous Peoples Day for you and your loved ones. I have to turn to Regional Chief Teegee because I have another event to go to, so I can't participate in the questions and answers either, but he is more than capable to answer all the questions that you'll have. So, Nenanaskamun Gisakitan.
Thank you, National Chief. Deneza Tsekuza Skyza Masai no Desni. I want to thank a big thank you to the Algonquin people and Anishinaabe people to allow us in the territory, and thank you, Elder, for the prayer starting us off in a good way. Certainly a very historic day today as we recognize the development of a national action plan. Thank you to the National Chief for allowing me to navigate this portfolio for the Assembly of First Nations. And part of the reason for me leading this portfolio was the experience we had in British Columbia. As you well know, the provincial government passed legislation 4 years ago, Bill C-41, recognizing the declaration as law, and certainly lending our experience to this whole process. I was more than willing to do that, and I also want to acknowledge the ad hoc Chiefs Committee on the National Action Plan for the work over the last year. I was put on this file a year ago. And you know, I was just thinking about this, and a journey of reconciliation, perhaps the most difficult step is the first step. And I think this, as a national action plan, is a first step. And as the National Chief said, you know, there are many out there that do not believe that this doesn't go far enough, and I'm of that concern too, because quite simply, you know, we want to do better. We want to see better. And where this action plan goes further than ours in British Columbia, it is an evergreen action plan where you can add to it, where Minister Lametti has committed to more resources. We heard you. We heard other regions and other Indigenous communities out there that stated, we need more consultation. We need more participation. I heard you. And that is required to have true reconciliation, of undoing well over 200 years of genocidal policies imposed on Indigenous peoples. Nothing good comes easy. And we're on this journey, and it requires trust, and it requires a good relationship. And this is what we're trying to create with the Assembly of First Nations, with the First Nations, Inuit, and the Métis, along with the federal government. Now, there's nothing like this in the world. We're on this journey together. And to create that space that we can really assert our sovereignty and our self-determination is very important to our Indigenous peoples, because far too often we ended up in that building back here, the Supreme Court of Canada. How appropriate that Tribal Chief Joe Alphonse is here, who fought a long, hard battle to recognize title, to recognize our sovereignty and self-determination out in British Columbia and Tsilhqot'in territory. Now, the recognition that we can't keep fighting in court, the recognition that we can't keep fighting on the lands, is built within the National Action Plan to finally come to a place where we can all make decisions together. That's the space we need to create. And that's the space I really believe that the National Action Plan allows. So moving forward, I am standing here and very optimistic, very hopeful that we can create that space that is rightfully ours as Indigenous peoples, that is rightfully ours, that we can govern ourselves, we can govern our own affairs, and we do have an ability, as stated in free, prior, and informed consent, make decisions for ourselves. That's the most important covenant within the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So as we move forward, it does require partnership, it does require resources, and perhaps more importantly, going forward, it does require time to engage with our First Nations to make this a better action plan. I heard you. I believe the presidents have heard you. The National Chief has heard you. So moving forward, we want to make this better, but let's take this step all together. And as I said, the most important step in a journey, especially in a journey towards reconciliation and undoing 200 years of genocidal policies that were imposed on Indigenous peoples, is perhaps that first step. So I want to thank you all. Masi cho, masai no dasni, masi.
Thank you so much for those inspiring words, Chief. Et maintenant, je cède la parole au ministre des Relations courantes autochtones, Marc Miller.
Kwekwe unusakut tanse. Hello, bonjour. I want to thank Mieli for tending the fire today, and Elder Jenny and Albert. Thanks for being here. All the leaders that are here today that have already been acknowledged on your territory. Frankie Cote, who's here standing in proxy for Chief Dill and White Duck, obviously is present. Your presence should be underlined. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. I am wearing a very oversized medallion, as you can see, that, as President Obed pointed out to me. It was given to me by, I'm not going off on a tangent yet, it was given to me by members of Sioux Valley Dakota Nation. They tend a number of white buffaloes that has the symbolic significance that many of you well know. But it's also the home of Zach Whitecloud, who's bringing home the Stanley Cup. And this is a proud moment to underline that. And I know many in the country see these really important moments, and especially with one of our two national sports, and see Zach Whitecloud and get really proud of him. But till a month ago, Zach Whitecloud didn't have Section 35 rights under the Constitution. He's part of the Lakota people, considered quote-unquote Indians under the Indian Act, but never had the inherent rights that exist as part of Section 35 of the Constitution that his peoples, the 9 communities in the Lakota communities in Canada, have long been denied, considered second-class First Nations, and with the stigma attached to that, something that's wrong and for 100 years has never been righted until a month ago. And I want to talk about that because this isn't an esoteric document that is born out of policy and is going to sit on the shelves and gather dust. It's a living document, as Regional Chief Teegee said, and it needs to stay that way. Its success and failure will be judged not by Canada, but by the people in this room and the people that they serve and that you serve and represent. So too today with the Métis Nation here today, and particularly Métis Nation of Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, who for ages have been ignored in their very basic right to organize themselves in their internal affairs, a basic right of self-governance. And with that affirmation of Section 35 and your basic rights that comes today, and in the implementation of both Powley and the Daniels decision that they fought so hard for, that is important, and it's important to celebrate it today. And that is what the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is about. We passed the law. We did something that, as President Obed said, is historical around the world. We moved from the big words of principle to policy to where we fail constantly in implementation. And this is an action plan. It's important to highlight that because this is about the rights of your peoples, the Métis, the rights of the Lakota people, the rights of the Chilcotin, the Wet'suwet'en, and the Haida who fought. And I know, Joe Alphonse, how you like to fight. And you win those. You've won too many of those fights. But you shouldn't have to fight. You're there with your grandson, your son, and this is about his future. And that, I think, is very important to remember today as we look around the room with well, Dave doesn't have any hair, but with people that have gray hair, that have fought so long for that generation, the generations that's coming up and that will make it into the 22nd century. As Wilton Littlechild said, the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People is about the starting line. It's not about the finish line. It's about finally making sure that Indigenous peoples are on an equal footing, whether we're negotiating, whether we're talking to each other, whether we are, well, you take us to court, you have that right. It was far too long denied. That'll continue. But this is about an action plan and the first period of a 3-period hockey game. Lots of people got to go and score some goals. There's no question about that. But this is about something that is far more important than just words on paper. They need to be implemented. Comme je l'ai dit en anglais, on parle d'un plan de match, on parle d'un pied d'égalité, finalement, pour les peuples autochtones qui se sont battus pour fort trop longtemps, pour faire prévaloir leurs droits des plus élémentaux, c'est-à-dire le droit d'autodétermination, le droit de s'affirmer en tant qu'une personne à entière égalité sous la Constitution, d'avoir des droits qui sont reconnus. Et sachez que le droit qui est nié pour une personne autochtone, c'est un droit qui est nié pour tous les peuples autochtones. A right denied for an Indigenous person is a right denied for all Indigenous people. Donc, on est dans la première période, on vient de commencer, il y a 3 périodes à jouer. Et le résultat du match sera guidé par ce beau plan de match qui a été tissé aujourd'hui par beaucoup de gens dans la pièce, mais aussi par beaucoup de fonctionnaires dans la fonction publique du Canada qui ont travaillé très fort, j'en vois dans la pièce. Ils auront plus de fil à retordre, évidemment, pour mettre en œuvre ce beau projet. I want to thank, finally, as I finish, the civil servants of the Government of Canada, because a lot of us take the podium here, but the work that is done and the muscle memory that needs to be built in all our departments is implemented by people that go to work, some Indigenous folks that have it a little heavier on their shoulders, but have fought for the rights of their people day in and day out within a very oppressive system that is the Government of Canada and with its civil service. I want to highlight them. I want to highlight all the allies in that group that have put so much work in, whether it's in justice or the other departments that will have to change that muscle memory. And so this is what this is about. And so I thank you. Je vous remercie infiniment. Merci, Cho. Merci.
Okay, merci beaucoup. Thank you, Minister Miller. I would now like to invite Elder Albert Leclerc to provide closing remarks. So, Elder Leclerc, the floor is yours.
Bonjour. Bonjour tout le monde. C'est une bonne journée aujourd'hui parce qu'il y a beaucoup de gouvernements. Merci beaucoup pour l'ouvrage. I say hello to everybody else. I'm going to speak in English now. I don't speak French all the time, but I was born French. Speaking French, so yeah. I heard a lot of good thoughts and a lot of things that today. We talk about implementation. And implementation is you need a plan and then work on that plan in order to get things done. Implementation sometimes is, well, we're going to implement this. When are you going to implement it? You got to have a plan in order to implement something. We did that years ago, many years ago. We were great buffalo hunters. Riel, And that group always had a provisional government to go hunting. You didn't overkill. You had people that had ladies do this, the men did that. And, you know, high firemen, they did whatever. But we had a plan. And this is what I'd like these people to understand. We need a plan. I'm going to say prayer now. Dear Lord, listen to all these people that are here today. Bless them. They're all doing something for us. And we like that. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Elder. Merci. Okay. Merci beaucoup, Elder Leclerc. It's been, before I turn it over I will turn it over actually to Diana Ibadi, Press Secretary for Minister Lametti, who will be responsible for the media question and answer session. So I want to thank everybody who participated, who spoke, and I want to wish everyone in the room a very happy National Indigenous Persons Day. Diana?
Thanks. We'll go ahead and get started with the question and answer session. Nous allons maintenant commencer avec la période des questions. Le format est une question et un suivi. S'il vous plaît, commencez avec votre nom et votre organisation. The format is one question, one follow-up. Please state your name and your media outlet before going ahead. Start with any questions in the room.
Hi there, Minister. Stephanie Taylor with the Canadian Press. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember a special Chiefs Assembly back in April where the AFN had asked for the timeline to be extended to do further consultations to deal with some of the shortcomings of the draft plan. Why didn't that extension happen?
Thank you, Stephanie, for the question. Well, first of all, the law was 2 years. We had put it into the original Act, Bill C-15, at the request primarily of AFN leadership at the time, former National Chief Bellegarde, as well as other regional chiefs, including Chief Teegee. We put out at that time, when I was speaking at that AFN Special Chiefs Assembly, we had put out a draft. At that point, it was roughly 100 articles. There was a flurry of intense activity over the next 2 months. There were roughly 80 articles added to that. There was a lot of back and forth at a number of different levels. So not just between my team or the federal government, Department of Justice, and First Nations leadership, but also at technical tables between First Nations, at multilateral technical tables among First Nations, Inuit and Métis, bilateral tables with us. There was a lot of engagement with individual nations like Chilcotin, and Chief Joe is here today. So there was a lot that happened. We knew that would be the case when we put out the draft plan, and we basically pushed as hard as we could to get what I think is a pretty good document. It's not a perfect document, as the National Chief has said. There's more work to be done, more consultation to be done. This is a marker. It's an important marker. It's a positive marker. Still a lot more work to be done, but we're moving in the right direction.
Why is there not a financial commitment or further investment, as you say, attached to this plan to further along the implementation of what a lot of these measures seem to be advancing work the government is already doing? So why is there not additional financial commitments coming today with this?
That's a great question. There have been some investments thus far in the process to develop this action plan. We know that more needs to be done. We are working towards identifying what next steps will be and what resources will be needed for those next steps, whether those resources are invested through Indigenous leadership groups throughout Canada, or whether invested within government or in other places. So that's all in progress. Today we've announced the plan, and I hope to have other announcements with respect to resources in the near future.
There are no other questions in the room. We can turn to those online. If you have a question, please raise your hand. S'il vous plaît, levez votre main si vous avez une question.
Hey, Chinook. Chinook has a question, I think.
Hello, Minister Lametti. It's Métis National from Canada's National Observer. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, perfect. So I know a veto power is not in the language of the action plan. So I'm just wondering, I'm still confused about the definition of free, prior, and informed consent, particularly around resource development projects. What has been the conversations like? Can we expect a framework in the future? Is it going to be on a project-to-project basis? Just anything that could help enlighten me.
I think you can expect a framework in the future. You'll see in the document, and this is something that was led in particular by Minister Wilkinson and NRCan, and I commend them for the work that they have done with Indigenous leadership to commit to the creation of a process that will help us better define the parameters of free, prior, and informed consent. The fundamental point about it is that it is a process. It is a process in which Indigenous peoples, Indigenous right holders are participating in the process from the get-go. And I think that gives me a great deal of optimism because Indigenous peoples will effectively be partners in projects, and I think that's critically important. And that, again, that's work that we look forward to. We know it's important. It's been underlined by Regional Chief Teegee in his remarks, and it's something that is, I think, important and has been underlined by a number of different First Nations leaders and industry leaders who there are investors, resource development companies, for example, who've understood that they need to have First Nations partnership from the get-go.
Perfect. Thank you. One follow-up. And so I'm just confused about what will the role of the provinces then be when it comes to that framework? Will you need the provinces to adopt an UNDRIP like BC in order that framework to even make sense practically? Yeah, just wondering if you need that the provinces to get on board with it.
Well, we have been clear that this only applies to federal legislation. That being said, British Columbia, as you've pointed out, does have a United Nations Declaration Act, and they do have an action plan for implementation as well. We're hoping there have been a number of times when this has been raised in the context of federal, provincial, territorial justice ministers' conferences. We're hoping that we'll be able to create a virtuous circle whereby more provinces and territories, formally or informally, begin to adopt the principles that are being developed. We hope to lead by example here, and I do hope that the good faith that Indigenous peoples are showing with respect to these issues will have a positive impact across provinces and areas of their jurisdiction.
Je pense qu'on a une question de Delphine Zhang de Radio-Canada.
Yes, can you hear me?
Oui.
Okay, it's a question for Teegee, Mr. Teegee, as Mrs. Archibald is not here anymore.
Mr. Teegee has already sadly had to catch a plane back to British Columbia, but we can try to answer the question. Or
you can't.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you can't.
You'll have to raise it with him. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Regional Chief Teegee is exceptionally popular, and that explains the...
There are no other questions on the line, so this will close our press conference. Ceci conclut notre conférence de presse. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Merci, Cho. Merci. Thank you. Miigwech.